What happens when a lifetime of sacrifice and love goes unappreciated? Ruth has spent years caring for her family, only to be ignored and betrayed by those she loves most. But as she uncovers the truth behind her granddaughter's lies and deceit, Ruth's quiet resolve transforms into a powerful journey of self-discovery, justice, and redemption. The road ahead is long, but the stakes are higher than ever. I often joke that if you stay invisible long enough, you start to believe it yourself. I'm Ruth, 58 years old, living in the small, quiet suburbs of Chicago. The house is modest, but it's mine, or it was. For years, I've been the glue holding things together. My daughter, Michelle, and my granddaughter, Kayla, depend on me for everything: money, care, stability. But none of them see it. Maybe it's because I've always been the one who keeps things running smoothly, that they think I'm a fixture in the background. I don't mind being the silent worker. I never have. It's just who I am. But the longer I do it, the more I disappear. After my divorce, I found myself with no one but my daughter and her family. Michelle is busy with her own life. It's like she forgot I was ever her mother. There's no malice, just indifference. And Kayla? Oh, Kayla. She's 19, rebellious, full of herself, and completely blind to everything I've done for her. She's always been ungrateful, pushing back against everything I try to teach her. It's as if the more I gave, the less they appreciated it. I'm just here, existing. Nothing more, nothing less. But then, something happened. It wasn't much, just a comment. One little thing that stuck with me. I had tried to give Kayla some advice about her future, about choosing a career that would set her up for a good life. She didn't want to hear it. She called me a stubborn old woman who didn't understand anything about today's world. She said I had never built anything. That stung. I could feel my heart break as she said it, but I didn't show it. I just smiled and walked away, telling myself she didn't mean it, but she did. And that's when everything changed. I started thinking about all the years I'd spent in silence, thinking about all the sacrifices I made for this family that never even noticed. I've paid for everything. The bills, the food, the education. It was all me. But none of them ever saw it. Not really. They didn't see me, just what I could provide. It wasn't just the lack of appreciation. It was the betrayal. That feeling had been growing inside me, small at first, then louder, more insistent. Maybe that's the reason I started looking into our finances. After all, I had always kept an eye on the money. I had to. How else would we manage? That's when I saw it. Something was wrong. Money was missing from the account. Large sums that shouldn't have been gone. I felt my heart tighten in my chest, panic rising in my throat. How could this happen? Where did it go? I dug deeper, pulled out every statement, every receipt, every record I could find. And there it was. Kayla had been taking money out of my account, draining it slowly, quietly, buying clothes, electronics, things I never saw her need. I was sick. How could she? How could the girl I had raised, the one I spent years working hard to support, betray me like this? I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I held back. I couldn't let her see me this way. I couldn't show weakness. But I was done. I was done being invisible. Done being the quiet, obedient matriarch who kept everything together while everyone else took advantage of me. It had to stop. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I confronted Kayla, I never expected this. She denied it at first. She acted shocked, even hurt. She said I was imagining things, that I was too old to understand her needs. She tried to turn the tables, to make me feel guilty for accusing her. But I knew better. This was not just some misunderstanding. This was deliberate. I saw the look in her eyes, the manipulation, the same look she had given me every time she wanted something. And that was it. I decided then, right there in that moment, that I would no longer be her victim. No longer would I allow my kindness and hard work to be taken for granted. But what would I do? What could I do? I didn't know then, but I would figure it out. And Kayla? She would pay for what she had done. Not in a way she would expect. I wasn't interested in revenge, not in the traditional sense, but I would make sure she paid for betraying me. I started making plans, quietly, silently. I wouldn't let her get away with this. No one would. It was time to take control of my life. Time to make sure that, from now on, I was the one who decided what happened. No more being invisible. No more being the silent one. The first step? Taking my money back. Taking back what was mine. what I had worked for, and that was only the beginning. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just sweep it under the rug like I had so many things before. This wasn't just about the money, although that was the catalyst. It was about the years I had spent taking care of everyone, the sacrifices I had made, and how little I had in return. It was about respect, or the lack of it. How could I have been so blind? How had I allowed myself to be used like that? I knew I had to do something, but the question was what? My gut told me that Kayla's betrayal was only the tip of the iceberg, but I couldn't quite grasp how deep this had all gone. I needed to understand what was happening, to see the whole picture, and so I started digging. I didn't just look at the bank statements anymore. I started going through everything, receipts, emails, and even the bills. Little by little, a picture emerged. The money that Kayla had been siphoning off wasn't just for clothing or new gadgets. There were hundreds of small transactions, gifts for her friends, dinners at fancy restaurants, even a few trips I never knew about. All of it was being paid for by my account, by the money I'd saved for her college education. The thought of it made my stomach turn. At that moment, I realized that Kayla hadn't just been taking from me. She had been living a lie, using me as a safety net while she splurged on her own life. Meanwhile, I'd been working day in and day out to make sure she could go to college, to give her opportunities I never had. But instead of gratitude, she gave me nothing but contempt. I spent hours that night going through the paperwork, and it wasn't until the early morning light began to filter through the curtains that I had a realization. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about something much bigger. It was about power. I had given her power over me by not seeing her for what she truly was. I had allowed her to take from me because somewhere deep inside, I wanted to believe that if I gave enough, if I sacrificed enough, she would see me, value me, maybe even love me. But that wasn't going to happen. Kayla didn't love me. She didn't even respect me. She used me, and I had let her. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let her continue taking from me, not without consequences. I wouldn't let my sacrifices be for nothing. This time, I would make her understand the depth of what she had done. I knew I needed to confront her, but there was something inside me that told me not to do it immediately. No, this time, I wouldn't let my emotions take the lead. I needed to plan. I needed to be smart about this. The next day, I kept my distance. I didn't let my face show anything. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way I had been before. I was cold, calm, and calculating. I went about my day as usual, making sure to take my time. I knew Kayla was waiting for the moment when I would explode. She thought she knew me. She thought she could control me with guilt and manipulation. But that wasn't going to work anymore. Later that afternoon, when Kayla was in her room, I found myself standing in the hallway outside her door. I didn't knock, just waited. I had a decision to make. Would I confront her now, or would I wait for the right moment? I decided to wait. I needed to be certain that she would know exactly what she had done, and that there would be no room for her to deny it. The days passed, and I found myself planning quietly, taking notes and compiling evidence. I could feel my resentment turning into something else. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a sense of determination. This wasn't just about getting even. This was about reclaiming control of my life. Kayla had taken everything I had given her, my time, my money, my love, and thrown it back in my face. But she had no idea who she was dealing with now. I wasn't going to be her doormat any longer. She thought she could walk all over me, but she was about to find out that I was done. And then, when the time was right, I would confront her. I would tell her everything, all the lies, all the deceit. I would make sure she knew exactly what she had done and how far she had pushed me. But first, I had one more thing to do. One final step before the confrontation. I needed to make sure that the consequences were real, that they would hit her where it hurt the most. I wasn't just going to let her apologize and move on. No, I was going to make sure she paid for what she had done. And so, I began to think bigger. The money I had saved for her future, it would never be hers now. Not after what she'd done. She needed to learn a lesson. And I was going to teach it to her. I was done being invisible. I was done being the one who cleaned up everyone else's mess. Now, it was time for me to take control. As I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the evidence I had gathered, I felt a sense of power rising within me. I had been a victim for far too long. But not anymore. Now I was in charge. And Kayla? Well, she was about to learn the hard way that you don't get to take advantage of someone forever. The next move was mine, and I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. It was time to make her pay. I remember that day as if it was yesterday, the day I decided to face Kayla, the day I decided to stop pretending. I had everything I needed: proof, receipts, documents, all the things she couldn't deny. I wasn't just walking into that room to scold her. I was walking in to take back control of my life. The thought made my stomach tighten in both fear and excitement. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. I waited for the right moment. Kayla was in the living room, her back turned as she scrolled through her phone. I had seen that same posture 100 times, as if the whole world was her stage, and the rest of us were just extras. She didn't hear me walk in, and for a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. The girl I had poured my life into was nothing but a stranger to me now. "Kayla," I said, my voice steady but low, betraying no emotion. She turned, surprised, like she hadn't expected me to speak. She put her phone down, but I could see the glimmer of irritation in her eyes, like she was already preparing to shut me out. "What is it, Grandma?" Her tone was the same, dismissive, as though this conversation was just another inconvenience for her. "I need to talk to you," I said, my gaze never wavering. "Now." Her eyebrows furrowed, but she didn't argue. She could tell by the look on my face that this was different from the usual back and forth we'd had over the years. This time, there was no hesitation in my eyes, no softness, no love in my voice. "All right," she muttered, standing up. She crossed her arms over her chest, clearly annoyed. "What's the big deal?" I handed her a pile of documents. "These are the bank statements from the last few months. And these," I shoved a few more papers into her hands, "are the receipts for the things you've bought with my money." "It's a little strange, don't you think? Especially since I never gave you permission to spend a dime." Kayla glanced at the papers, then looked up at me with wide, startled eyes. "What the hell is this, Grandma?" She tried to act confused, but there was a shift in her expression. The bravado she had been wearing started to crack. "I'm done being used by you, Kayla," I said quietly, but my words were sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "I trusted you. I believed in you. I thought you were better than this." My voice was controlled, but inside, the anger was building. It was a rage I had buried for so long that it felt like a flood. Now it was finally breaking through. "But you've been stealing from me, taking what I earned, what I've worked for, and for what? To live a life I never gave you the right to live." Kayla's face paled, and for the first time I saw real fear flash in her eyes. She took a step back, fumbling with the papers I had handed her. "I didn't steal anything. You're overreacting. This is just a mistake, okay? I didn't mean to." "Don't lie to me, Kayla," I interrupted, my voice cold, biting. "I know exactly what you've been doing. You've been taking money out of my account, money I had saved for your future. And then you went further. You've been making purchases, running up debt, all in my name. Do you even care how much damage you've done?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She couldn't respond, not with any honesty, because there was nothing she could say to make this right. I watched her, my eyes hardening with each passing second. "I've given you everything. I've worked my entire life to give you a future, a chance at something better than what I had, and you repay me with lies and theft." Kayla opened her mouth again, but the words she tried to form were lost in the weight of her guilt. She couldn't find an excuse, not this time. She had nowhere to hide. "You don't get to do this to me anymore," I continued, each word more deliberate than the last. "You've crossed a line, and now there will be consequences. You won't just get away with this. Not this time." Kayla's face twisted, and she looked like she might break down, but instead, her expression turned defensive. "What do you want from me, huh? You're just going to ruin my life because of some stupid mistake?" She wiped her eyes, but her anger was rising again, and I could tell she was trying to hold it back. "I've been doing all of this because I need help, and you never give me a break. I never get what I want." "Stop," I snapped, the final shred of my patience slipping away. "You don't get to manipulate me anymore, Kayla. You're not a child anymore, and I'm not going to let you play the victim. You've hurt me, and now you'll have to face the consequences." I saw the fear turn into something else, defiance, but it was too late for that now. I wasn't scared of her anymore. "Don't you dare think you can make this right with a couple of empty apologies. You're going to make things right with your actions," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of my resolve. "You're going to work off the money you've taken. Every single cent. I'm not giving you a dime for college anymore. You'll pay me back, and you'll start by doing community service, real work, something that will make you understand what hard work really means. Kayla's jaw clenched. You can't do that, she hissed, her voice breaking with frustration. You can't just make me do something like that. Oh, I can, I said. The calmness in my tone contrasting with the fire I felt inside. And I will. You've stolen from me, and now you're going to learn the value of what you've taken. Kayla's eyes widened, and I could see the realization setting in. There would be no easy way out of this. No more manipulation, no more excuses. This was the beginning of her learning what it meant to truly face the consequences of her actions. I could feel it, the weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. I had taken control, and I wasn't backing down. Do you have anything else to say? I asked her. My voice steady, unwavering. Kayla's face softened for a second, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked away instead, unwilling to meet my gaze. I knew then that this was the turning point. There was no going back now. This wasn't just about the money. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, reclaiming my dignity, and that was something I wasn't going to let anyone take from me again. I turned and walked out of the room, feeling stronger than I had in years. Kayla was silent behind me, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to look back. I was done being invisible, done being the one who cleaned up the messes. The days after the confrontation were a blur. I didn't know what I expected from Kayla, but I sure as hell didn't expect her to stay silent for so long. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to defend herself. She just disappeared. At least, that's how it felt. She avoided me. Michelle, too. It was almost as if they were trying to pretend nothing had happened, like I hadn't just laid bare the truth about everything. I didn't care, though. For the first time in a long while, I didn't care. I was tired of playing the martyr, tired of holding everything together for them while they went on with their lives, never thinking about what it cost me. If they were going to avoid me, then fine. Let them. I wasn't going to beg for their attention anymore, but there was something inside of me, a flicker of doubt that kept nagging at me. What if Kayla was just waiting for me to back down? What if she thought I was bluffing? Would she try to turn this around, make me feel guilty again? I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't give her the chance. So, I did what I had to do next. I took action. I called the lawyer. I knew I didn't want to take this to court. Not yet, at least. But I also knew I wasn't going to let Kayla get away with the theft. No, she needed to learn what responsibility meant. And if that meant the legal system getting involved, then so be it. The lawyer was sympathetic when I explained everything to him. You've got a good case here, Ruth, he said. But we're going to need solid proof, clear evidence. I'd recommend a couple of things, starting with freezing her access to your account, and then moving forward with the legal process if necessary. I was shaking when I hung up the phone. I had never imagined my life would come to this, a point where I was prepared to bring my own granddaughter to justice, but that was where I was now. That was what she had forced me into. The next morning, I took the first step. I went to the bank and made sure to put a hold on all the accounts. It was my money, after all. I wasn't going to let her bleed me dry any longer. It felt good, empowering, to take back that little piece of control. But I also knew it was just the beginning. That night, Kayla finally came to me. She knocked on my door, hesitant at first, like she wasn't sure whether or not I was home. I had been expecting her, honestly. She wasn't going to let this slide. But the look on her face, the guilt mixed with defiance, told me everything I needed to know. She didn't speak right away, just stood there, hands tucked nervously into the pockets of her hoodie. It was almost like she didn't know how to face me. "Grandma, we need to talk," she said finally, her voice flat, not the whiny tone she usually used when she was trying to manipulate me. This was different. She was scared. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for her to continue. The silence between us was thick, heavy. I could feel her tension, her uncertainty. But she wasn't going to back down. She never did. I'm sorry, she said, the words stumbling out. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I was just... She stopped herself, her eyes dropping to the floor. No, I interrupted. You didn't just make a mistake, Kayla. This wasn't a small mistake. You took from me. You used me. You think an apology is going to fix that? She looked up at me then, her eyes wide with confusion. But I didn't want to hurt you. I was just trying to get ahead, trying to survive. Survive? I repeated, my voice hardening. You've been living off of me for years, Kayla. You think you're surviving by taking what's mine? You've been taking advantage of me, and you know it. She bit her lip, clearly struggling to find the right words, but all I saw was the same manipulative girl who had used my kindness for her own gain. Her voice was quiet when she spoke next, and there was a flicker of desperation in her eyes. Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Grandma. I know I messed up, but please, don't make me do the community service. It's humiliating. I'll do anything else, I swear. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't enough to make me back down. Not anymore. I had given her too many chances, and every time she had taken advantage of my love for her. She thought she could twist me into feeling sorry for her. She thought that I would give in to the same old manipulation. But not this time. You've already humiliated yourself, Kayla, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. You've stolen from me, betrayed me, and now you'll face the consequences. You will do the work. You will learn what it means to truly work for something. I saw her face fall, a flash of anger and hurt crossing her features, but she didn't say anything else. She knew this battle was lost. I could see it in the way her shoulders slumped, the way her eyes welled up with tears she wasn't willing to shed in front of me. I'll make sure the lawyer gets everything he needs to move forward, I added, my words sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. You won't escape this, Kayla. For a moment, there was a silence between us, one that stretched for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't the silence of reconciliation. It was the silence of a broken trust, of a relationship that could never go back to what it once was. Kayla turned, her back to me as she walked away, not saying a word. The door shut behind her with a soft click, and I was left standing there, staring at the empty space where she had stood. I felt something in me shift in that moment. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling, but it was real. I wasn't the victim anymore. I had fought for my life, for my peace of mind, and I had won. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. I wasn't invisible anymore, and Kayla, she had a long way to go before she could ever begin to understand that. It was done. I had done what I had to do, and now it was time for me to start living for me. The weeks that followed felt strange, like I was floating above everything, detached, but somehow still deeply involved. Kayla had stopped trying to contact me. Michelle, too, had gone quiet, avoiding me more than usual. I could tell she was caught between defending her daughter and realizing the truth. She couldn't have missed the signs. She just hadn't been paying attention. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I kept myself busy. I planned my trip more meticulously, poring over travel books and websites late into the night. This trip, my escape, was no longer just a dream. It was my future. I was going to reclaim my life, piece by piece. But no matter how much I planned, a part of me couldn't shake the sense of unresolved tension. Something in me still wanted Kayla to face what she had done, truly understand the depth of her betrayal. She hadn't even apologized, not once. It was hard not to feel disappointed, but I wasn't going to allow that to derail me anymore. I had done what I could. Now the consequences were hers to face. Then, one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't unexpected. I had already arranged for the legal paperwork, but still, seeing that envelope with my name on it made my stomach flip. The letter was from the lawyer, confirming that Kayla's case had been processed and the court had set her community service hours. The legal system was now in motion, and I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me as I read through the details. She would be working with local organizations, cleaning, serving food at shelters, doing whatever she could to atone for the money she had stolen. But part of me knew it wouldn't be enough. A simple sentence of punishment wouldn't bring back the trust she had shattered. There was no true justice for what she had done to me. She would complete her hours and go on, unchanged. I wasn't sure why that thought bothered me so much. Maybe I wanted more for her, or maybe I was just angry at the whole situation. I sat in the living room that afternoon, staring at the letter in my hands, when Michelle finally reached out. She hadn't come over in days, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Maybe she was still struggling to reconcile what had happened, or maybe, like Kayla, she just didn't want to face the truth. I didn't expect her to knock. She just walked in, as though nothing had changed. "Mom," she started, her voice tentative. "Can we talk?" I set the letter down and looked at her. I didn't want to speak, didn't want to invite her in, but I knew I had to. This wasn't going to fix itself without a conversation, no matter how difficult it was. "Come in," I said simply. She stood awkwardly in the doorway for a moment before walking inside. She didn't sit right away, as though unsure of where she stood in my house. There was a heavy silence, but I didn't rush to fill it. I had learned to let silence be its own message. Finally, she sighed, looking me in the eyes. "I don't know how to say this," Michelle began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "But I'm sorry. I should have been paying more attention. I should have been there for you. And I wasn't." I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear her words, if I even wanted to. A part of me wanted to forgive her right away, to let it all slide because she was my daughter, my flesh and blood. But I couldn't. Not this time. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "You weren't there, for me or for her. I've been doing everything for everyone for years and no one even noticed. And I'm done, Michelle. I'm done." She flinched at my words, but I wasn't going to soften the blow. She had to understand. She had to feel it. "I didn't want to see it," she whispered, lowering her head. "But I see it now. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to. I want to be a better daughter, a better mother to Kayla." Her apology was sincere, but I wasn't sure it was enough. The years of neglect, of her turning a blind eye to what was happening in my life, couldn't just be undone with a few words. My heart softened a little, but I wasn't ready to let go of the hurt. I had to let her sit in this discomfort for a while. Maybe that would help her understand. "You can start by making sure Kayla faces the consequences of her actions," I said, watching her carefully. "She has to work for what she took from me, and I'm not going to let her off the hook just because she's family." Michelle's face tightened, but she nodded. "I know. I will. I'll make sure of it." There was a long silence between us. I could tell she wanted to say more, but she didn't. She had finally come to understand that she couldn't fix things by offering empty words. She would have to show me, prove to me that she was truly sorry. I didn't expect that to happen overnight, but it would happen if she was really committed to it. When she stood up to leave, she looked at me one last time, her face filled with regret. "I'll make this right, Mom. I swear." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. As the door closed behind her, I sat back down in my chair, still staring at the letter in my hands. The next steps were clear. Kayla would serve her community service, and Michelle would figure out what she could do to repair our broken relationship. But me? I was moving forward. No more looking back, and I would finally get what I had worked so hard to earn. Peace. I took a deep breath and turned my attention back to my travel plans. My journey was just beginning, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. No more sacrifices, no more invisibility. It was my time. The first week of my trip arrived faster than I expected. It wasn't a grand departure, no dramatic farewells, no tearful goodbyes. It was simply me packing my things, locking the door behind me, and leaving. I didn't look back, and if I'm being honest, I was relieved. When I arrived at the airport, I wasn't nervous or overwhelmed like I had expected. I was calm, focused. This was the first time in years that I wasn't worried about someone else's needs, someone else's happiness. For the first time, I was making a decision for myself, not based on what anyone else expected of me. I boarded the plane and found my seat by the window. I watched as the city disappeared beneath me, a sea of concrete and memories fading into the distance. I didn't feel sad, and I didn't feel guilty. I felt free, and that freedom felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I didn't even know where I was going first. It didn't matter. I'd always dreamed of seeing the world, but I had always put it off, too busy with work, with life, with everyone else. Now, I was living my dream, and for the first time, I was truly living it for myself. The first stop was Paris. I wandered the streets with no agenda, no schedule. I went to museums, strolled through parks, and sat in cafes for hours with nothing but my thoughts and a cup of coffee. I took in everything, every sight, every sound, every smell, because I could. I didn't have to explain myself or rush to get back to anyone. But as much as I tried to lose myself in the beauty of it all, the thought of my family lingered in the back of my mind. I was still wondering whether Kayla had learned anything from what I'd done, whether she had come to understand the depth of her actions. I wanted to believe that she was beginning to understand the consequences of her behavior, but part of me wasn't so sure. I knew that her community service wasn't going to be a quick fix. She had to face the reality of what she had done. And for that to happen, I knew she needed time, time to grow, time to learn. But was she willing to learn? Or would she just go through the motions? That night, as I sat in my hotel room in Paris, I checked my phone. The screen lit up with messages. None from Kayla. None from Michelle either. It didn't surprise me. I had already prepared myself for the possibility that they would try to avoid me for a while. They were probably still processing everything. There was a message from my lawyer, though. The court had officially set the terms for Kayla's community service. She would have to serve at least 200 hours at local charities, working directly with those less fortunate. There would be no shortcuts, no get-out-of-jail-free cards. The judge had been clear. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. Kayla needed to understand the gravity of what she had done, and this was part of it. The message confirmed what I had already known. Kayla was going to have to face the consequences, no matter how much she resented me for it. She would have to serve those hours, whether she liked it or not. I closed my eyes, letting out a deep breath. There was a part of me that wanted to reach out to her, to tell her it would be okay, to reassure her that I wasn't trying to ruin her life. But then I realized I couldn't. I couldn't do it for her anymore. She had to take responsibility. She had to make things right on her own. I spent the next few days in Paris, taking in the sights and letting the city change me. Each day felt like I was shedding more of the person I had been, the woman who had given and given, only to be ignored and taken for granted. In Paris, I found a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. I was alive, not just existing, and that feeling, that freedom, was everything I had been looking for. As the days passed, I began to realize something else. I wasn't just escaping the chaos of my family. I was also escaping the expectations I had placed on myself for so long. I had spent my life believing that I needed to take care of everyone, that it was my job to hold things together. But it wasn't. It never had been. It was a burden I had chosen to carry, but one that had nearly crushed me in the process. In Paris, I learned that it was okay to be selfish. It was okay to prioritize my own happiness. I didn't have to answer to anyone anymore. But the more I explored, the more I realized that this journey was about more than just running away from my problems. It was about facing them head on. I wasn't just running from my past, I was confronting it. And Kayla? She was part of that past. I knew I couldn't continue to avoid the truth about her. She had stolen from me, betrayed my trust, and manipulated me for years. But what hurt the most was not the theft. It was the realization that I had allowed her to do it. I had allowed myself to be blind to the damage she was causing, because I wanted to believe that she would eventually change. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. That wasn't for me to decide. I wasn't going to keep punishing myself for what she had done, but I also wasn't going to forget what had happened. The truth was, Kayla wasn't the only one who needed to change. I did too. I needed to learn how to let go, how to stop being the person who carried everyone's burdens. The next stop on my journey was Rome, and while I was excited to see the Colosseum, the Sistine Chapel, and the streets where history had been made, I realized something. This was where my own history could start anew. The woman I was before, the one who sacrificed for everyone else, had to be left behind. It was time for me to build my own story. As the plane took off from Paris and headed toward Rome, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just escaping my past, I was finally embracing my future, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take me. I landed in Rome just as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the ancient city. It was breathtaking. The first thing I noticed was the sound, the murmur of people in the streets, the laughter of tourists, the hum of life that felt both familiar and new. I had never traveled by myself before, at least not like this. It felt strange at first. But there was also a comfort in the unknown, a freedom in not having anyone else's expectations hanging over me. Rome was overwhelming in the best possible way. Every street was a testament to history, every building a reminder of time gone by. I walked the cobbled streets for hours that first day, visiting the iconic landmarks, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, the Roman Forum. But it wasn't just the grandeur of the places that struck me. It was the small moments, the quiet, the peace of just being there, standing in front of something that had endured for centuries. I had no agenda, no schedule. Oh, for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to be somewhere, to do something. I could just be. But even in the serenity of Rome, there were moments when my mind wandered back to my family. Kayla, the mess she had created, the guilt I felt about cutting her off, and Michelle, who was still trying to find her way through all of this. I didn't know what they were doing, how they were coping. I didn't know if they had learned anything from what I had forced them to face, but I realized, somewhere in my heart, that it didn't matter as much as it once had. I had given them everything I could, and now it was time to live for myself. As I walked through the Piazza Navona, I stopped at a small cafe for a coffee. It was nothing extraordinary, just a little place tucked between two old buildings, but it felt like the perfect spot to sit and think. The sound of chatter, the clink of espresso cups, and the distant hum of city life created a soothing atmosphere that made me feel grounded. I ordered a cappuccino and took my seat at an outdoor table. The waiter brought my coffee with a warm smile, and I couldn't help but smile back. Small gestures like that reminded me how simple life could be when I wasn't wrapped up in the chaos of others' problems. I sipped my coffee, watching people walk by, tourists, locals, couples, families, each of them lost in their own worlds. I couldn't help but think of Kayla again. I wanted her to grow up, to realize what she had done, to understand the pain she had caused. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't my responsibility anymore. She had to face the consequences of her actions on her own. The lawyer had told me Kayla would have to serve 200 hours of community service, and I wondered how she was handling it. Was she angry, resentful, or was she for the first time starting to see the weight of her decisions? I had no answers, and I wasn't going to chase them anymore. That was the hardest lesson I had to learn. Sometimes, you just have to let go. I had spent so many years trying to fix everything, trying to be the one to keep everyone together. But I had learned that people have to fix themselves. They have to want to change, and if they don't, you can't force it. And so, as I sat there in Rome, I realized that I was no longer waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't going to live my life for Michelle or Kayla or anyone else. It was time to live for me. The next day, I visited the Vatican. The grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica took my breath away. I stood there for a long time, marveling at the beauty, the history, the artistry of it all. But what struck me the most was the overwhelming sense of peace that seemed to radiate from the place. I wasn't religious, but I could feel the weight of centuries of devotion in the air. It was humbling. As I stood there, staring up at the dome, I couldn't help but think about how many years I had spent trying to be the person everyone else needed me to be. I had never stopped to think about what I needed. I had always assumed that my role was to give, to sacrifice, to be there for everyone else. But I wasn't happy. I was tired, and I was losing myself in the process. And now, standing there in the heart of Rome, I understood. It was okay to be selfish. It was okay to focus on what made me happy, on what made me feel alive. I didn't need to sacrifice myself anymore. I had spent my life giving to others, but now it was time to give to myself. The next few days passed in a blur of sightseeing, quiet reflection, and a growing sense of empowerment. I felt a shift inside me. Every step I took in Rome, I was shedding pieces of the old Ruth, the one who lived for others, the one who stayed invisible. I was finally beginning to feel like I could stand on my own 2 feet, without the weight of everyone else's expectations bearing down on me. On the 4th day of my stay, I received a message from Michelle. I hadn't heard from her in a while, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I had been so focused on myself, on my journey, that I hadn't thought about how things might be for her back home. She apologized for the silence, said she'd been trying to sort things out. I read her message, then set my phone down. I wasn't ready to respond yet. I wasn't sure what to say. She was still figuring out her role in all of this, and I didn't want to rush it. What was important was that I was no longer waiting for her, or for anyone else, to make things right. I had already done that for myself. Rome was teaching me more than I ever expected. It wasn't just about the sights or the food or the beauty. It was about learning to be still, to be present, and to finally, after all these years, take care of myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My next stop would be Florence, and from there, who knew? I was no longer tied to a plan, a set of expectations. I was going to let the road take me wherever it wanted. And maybe, just maybe along the way, I'd figure out what my next chapter would look like. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally free. Florence felt like a place that existed outside of time. The moment I stepped off the train, the city greeted me with its old-world charm. The narrow streets lined with medieval buildings, the sweet smell of gelato wafting through the air, and the distant hum of life made it feel like I was in a living painting. It was impossible not to get caught up in its beauty, and yet I felt a quiet calm inside me. There was something about this place, something I couldn't quite name, that made me feel like I was where I needed to be. I had always loved art, but I never truly appreciated it until now. Standing in front of the Uffizi Gallery, I saw the works of masters, Da Vinci, Botticelli, Michelangelo, and for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to create something meaningful. These artists had left a piece of themselves behind, something that would last far beyond their lifetimes, and I wondered, what would I leave behind? What legacy was I creating for myself? For so long, I had been living for everyone else, shaping my life to please others, to fulfill their expectations, to hold everything together. But here, surrounded by these masterpieces, I realized that I needed to create my own story, one that was just for me. My past, the mistakes I had made, the relationships that had broken down, those were chapters that had already been written. But the pages ahead, those were mine to fill. I spent my days in Florence wandering through museums and churches, marveling at the art, and letting my thoughts wander along with me. Every painting, every statue, every fresco seemed to whisper the same message. You are the creator of your own life. But there were moments, quiet moments, when I thought about Kayla. I wondered how she was doing with her community service. Had she learned anything? Was she truly understanding the weight of what she had done? I had no answers, and I didn't want to know. I had to let her find her own way. I couldn't keep carrying her burden. I wasn't sure what to expect when I first confronted her, when I first realized the depths of her betrayal. Part of me wanted to believe that she was still that sweet little girl who once looked up to me with innocent eyes, but that wasn't who she was anymore, and that wasn't who I was either. I had to accept that we both had changed, and maybe that was for the best. Maybe it was time for us to both find our own paths, to grow in separate directions. A few days later, as I sat in the Piazza del Duomo, the heart of Florence, I found myself reflecting on what had truly changed since I left Chicago. I wasn't just escaping my past, I was confronting it. I was taking the time to heal, to rebuild who I was after years of giving everything to people who never truly appreciated it. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange light over the cathedral, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. The world didn't need to understand why I was here or what I had been through. The only person who needed to understand was me. I was learning how to let go, not just of Kayla or Michelle, but of the version of myself that had been trapped in obligation and expectation. I was learning how to live for me. When I received another message from Michelle, my heart didn't race with anxiety anymore. She apologized again, said she was still figuring out her place in all of this, and that she was trying to repair her relationship with Kayla. She said she was sorry for not being there for me, for not noticing how much I had been sacrificing. I read her message but didn't reply immediately. Instead, I let it sit with me for a while. There was a time when I would have dropped everything to fix things, to smooth things over, but I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to rush to forgive her because I had already forgiven myself. I had learned that people can change, but they also have to do the work themselves. It wasn't up to me to fix their mistakes anymore. I sat there on the stone bench, the cool evening air wrapping around me as I watched the people walking by. Tourists, locals, lovers, hand in hand. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't waiting for Michelle or Kayla to come around. I wasn't waiting for anyone to validate my decision. I had stepped away from the life I once knew. I was no longer defined by my relationships with others. I was learning to define myself. The next morning, I decided to visit the Boboli Gardens, an oasis of green tucked behind the Pitti Palace. It was a place of solitude, a place where I could lose myself in the serenity of nature. The gardens stretched out before me, a beautiful maze of pathways, fountains, and sculptures. As I wandered through the lush landscape, I thought about what I wanted from my future. I had spent so many years living for others, giving everything I had to my family. And now it was time to give to myself. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I was finally in control of it. I wasn't bound by the past anymore. I wasn't tied down by the guilt or the shame that had held me captive for so long. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the gardens, allowing myself to simply be. I wasn't rushing, I wasn't planning, I wasn't thinking about the next step. I was living in the moment, and for the first time in years, it felt right. As I sat on a bench, looking out at the city below, I realized that I had finally found the peace I had been searching for. I had taken the most difficult step, walking away from everything I had known, and now I was free. I wasn't waiting for Kayla or Michelle to understand me. I wasn't waiting for them to apologize or to make things right. I was living my life for me, and that was enough. The next chapter of my life was still unwritten, but I was ready to write it. I wasn't scared anymore. For the first time, I was living exactly how I was meant to. The following weeks in Florence passed in a blur of quiet exploration and peaceful solitude. I found myself waking up every day with a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. There was no rush. There was no one who needed me. I was free. I visited galleries and cafes, wandered through the winding streets of the city, and sometimes just sat in parks, watching people pass by without any agenda. It felt like I was breathing for the first time in a long time, like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't have to keep fixing things anymore. I didn't have to save anyone. The best part of this newfound freedom was the space it gave me to think about who I really was, separate from the roles I had played for so long. Mother, grandmother, caretaker. I was just Ruth now. I was rediscovering the person I had forgotten along the way. But even amidst the beauty and peace of Florence, there was still a lingering thought that I couldn't quite shake. I had left Chicago with the hope that I could leave everything behind, but there were moments when I couldn't help but wonder about my family, about Kayla. How was she holding up? Was she genuinely learning from what had happened? Or was she simply going through the motions of her punishment? I couldn't deny that a part of me wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the hurt she had caused. I had spent years sacrificing for her, for Michelle, and for the family, and now I was the one who needed to heal. I checked my phone more often than I wanted to admit, but it wasn't for any urgent updates or calls from Kayla. It was because I still cared. It was hard not to. Finally, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a message from Michelle. It was short, simple. "I'm sorry, Mom. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I want to make things right with you and Kayla. I know I haven't been there for you the way I should have been. I just need more time to process everything." I sat there, holding my phone, staring at the words. The message wasn't much. It wasn't a grand apology, nor did it come with promises of change, but it was something. And in that moment, I knew it was enough. Michelle was on her own journey, just like Kayla. She was trying, and that was all I could ask for. I thought about how I had spent so many years trying to fix everything for them, trying to be the glue that held it all together. But the truth was, I couldn't fix everything, and I had to stop trying. The next day, I took a train to Venice. The journey was long, but I welcomed it. I didn't have anywhere to be, and the idea of traveling on my own, without a care in the world, felt like luxury. I passed through small towns, watched the landscape shift from the rolling hills of Tuscany to the flatlands near the Adriatic coast. As I sat by the window, watching the world pass by, I realized that this trip wasn't just a way to escape. It was a way to reconnect with myself. I had spent so long hiding behind the roles I played for others, but now I was learning to just be, and it felt good. I arrived in Venice as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the canals. I wandered through the narrow streets, letting the sound of the gondola oars splashing against the water and the distant chatter of tourists wash over me. There was something magical about Venice, something that made you feel like you were walking through a dream. The city was both timeless and alive with energy. As I walked along the Grand Canal, I found a small cafe by the water and sat down with a glass of wine. I didn't need to hurry anymore. I didn't have to answer to anyone. This moment, this feeling of being completely free, was mine. Later, I sat in a quiet corner of the city, watching as the gondolas glided by, the soft murmurs of the tourists blending with the lull of the water. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't worrying about what was going to happen when I returned home. I wasn't obsessed with fixing things. I was just living. And then, as if I had known this moment was coming, I realized something. I didn't need to know what Kayla or Michelle were doing. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them to understand. The only person whose approval I needed was mine. That night, I went back to my hotel room, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I just sat there looking out over the city. There was a peace in the quiet, the kind of peace I had been looking for my entire life. And now, I had it. I had been running for so long, running from guilt, from responsibility, from my own needs. But in Venice, I stopped running, and I realized that I had everything I needed to move forward. The next morning, I walked through the winding streets of Venice, but it wasn't the city I was exploring. It was me. I was discovering who I was outside of all the expectations and obligations I had carried for so long. I didn't know where the road would take me next, but I was okay with that. This journey wasn't about finding answers. It was about giving myself the freedom to find peace, to finally live for myself. And as the gondola gently rocked beneath me on the Grand Canal, I knew that I was exactly where I needed to be. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't waiting for forgiveness or for things to be fixed. I was living my life, and that was enough. The days in Venice seemed to stretch on endlessly, yet I never grew tired of the beauty around me. Every corner of this city whispered secrets of the past, of people who had walked these same streets centuries before me. There was a quiet energy here, a slow rhythm to life that matched my own new pace, the weight of my old life, the years of sacrifice, the years of trying to hold my family together. It all seemed like a distant memory now. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I was carrying the burden of everyone's expectations. I wasn't needed, and that felt liberating. It wasn't that I didn't love Michelle and Kayla. I did. I loved them deeply, more than they could ever know. But love, I had learned, doesn't mean sacrifice at your own expense. It doesn't mean constantly putting others first while losing yourself in the process. Love is also about taking care of yourself, about knowing when to step back and let others face their own consequences. And so, that was what I had done. I had stepped back, and in doing so, I had found a kind of peace that I hadn't known I was searching for. I still thought about them, about Michelle and Kayla, often. I wondered how they were managing, how they were coping with the aftermath of everything that had happened. I thought about how Kayla had reacted to her community service sentence. Was she resentful? Was she learning anything? I couldn't know, and frankly, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The truth was, I had done everything I could. I had given them all the love I had, all the support they needed, but at some point, I had to let them find their own way. I wasn't their savior, and I wasn't going to keep being the one to fix everything. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was necessary. And every day that I spent walking through the streets of Venice, every quiet moment spent sipping coffee in small cafes or sitting by the water, I felt a little stronger. I was finally learning to live for myself, without guilt, without the weight of obligation. On the 5th morning in Venice, I received another message. This time it was from Kayla. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, but I steeled myself, prepared for whatever it was. "Grandma," it began. "I know I messed up. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make up for everything I did, but I'm trying. The community service isn't easy, but I get it now. I know I've hurt you. I don't know if I can ever fix things, but I want to try. I'm sorry." I sat there, reading the message over and over. Part of me wanted to reach out, to tell her that it was okay, that I forgave her, but I didn't. Not yet, because part of me knew that forgiveness wasn't something I needed to offer in a moment's haste. She had to prove herself, not to me, but to herself. It was a quiet victory, a small one, but significant. Kayla was beginning to realize the depth of her actions, and maybe that was the first step toward healing, not just for her, but for me too. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed my phone and went for a walk by the canals, the soft water lapping against the edges of the gondolas. I needed space. I needed to think. The message wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It wasn't an apology out of guilt or obligation. It was an acknowledgement of her mistakes and a desire to make things right. And in that moment, I realized something important. I had spent so many years waiting for others to change, to make things right. But change doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small, incremental steps. And sometimes you have to let people take those steps on their own. I had already taken mine. As I walked, I couldn't help but smile. The world was still beautiful. And for the first time, I wasn't looking for answers. I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell me it was okay to live my life. The gondolas passed me by, the soft murmur of conversation floating in the air. And I knew for the first time in years that I was exactly where I needed to be. The next morning, I left Venice behind, taking the train to Milan. The journey was long, but it gave me time to reflect, to think about all that had happened. I had come so far, from a woman trapped in her family's demands, always putting everyone else first, to a woman who had finally realized that her own happiness mattered too. Milan was different. It was fast-paced, modern, and full of energy, but there was something about it that felt right. I didn't need to slow down anymore. I didn't need the quiet of Venice. I was ready to embrace something new, something bold. As I checked into my hotel, I took a moment to look at the skyline. The city stretched out before me, full of possibilities, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I had no idea where my life would go from here, but I was okay with that. I was ready to take whatever came next. I still wasn't sure if I'd ever return to Chicago. Part of me wanted to see how Michelle and Kayla were doing, to see if they had truly changed, but the other part of me knew I didn't need to. I had done all I could. I had already given them everything I had, and now it was time to live my own life. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. Not for their forgiveness, not for their approval. I was living for myself, and that was enough. In that moment, I realized that the true journey wasn't about where I was going. It was about the freedom I had found within myself. And as I stood there, looking out over Milan, I knew that no matter what came next, I was ready. Milan was everything I imagined it would be, and nothing like I expected. The city had an air of elegance that hung in the streets like a faint perfume, sophisticated, yet accessible. It was a place that thrived on movement, on progress, on creation. The energy was contagious, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was truly part of something bigger. The history, the fashion, the architecture, it all came together in a way that felt exhilarating. But it was more than the city's beauty that drew me in. Milan was the final chapter of my journey, the end of this part of the road. It felt like the right place to truly let go of everything I had been carrying. The years of resentment and guilt, the constant pull of family that I had tried so hard to manage. I spent my days wandering the city, visiting art galleries and sipping coffee in quiet piazzas. Milan had its own rhythm, and I found myself keeping time with it. The hustle and bustle around me felt strangely comforting now. There was no rush, no need to keep up with the lives I had once been entangled in. I was on my own, and for once, I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete. It wasn't until I visited the Duomo, a cathedral that seemed as old as time itself, that I realized how much had changed. As I stood on the rooftop, gazing over the city, the magnitude of the moment hit me. I wasn't just running away from something. I was running towards something new, something mine. It was a realization I hadn't expected, but it hit me with a force that was almost overwhelming. For so long I had felt invisible, like I was living in the background of my own life, watching as everything else unfolded. But now, standing on the rooftop of the Duomo, I felt like I had truly come alive. I had found peace, not just in the quiet streets of Florence or the romantic canals of Venice, but in myself. I had stopped waiting for others to define me, to tell me who I should be or how I should feel. The power to control my own story, my own happiness, had always been in my hands. I just hadn't realized it until now. That night, as I sat in a cozy restaurant in the Brera district, I received a call from Michelle. It had been a while since we last spoke, and I hadn't expected it. I wasn't sure if I was ready to dive back into everything with her, but I knew the call had to come eventually. "Mom," she said when I answered, her voice softer than I remembered. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about everything that happened. I know I wasn't there for you. I didn't see what you were going through, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to make things right." I sat there, taking in her words, but I didn't rush to respond. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. I needed to hear her, but I also needed to process what she was saying. "I've been trying to fix things with Kayla," Michelle continued. "She's not the same person, Mom. She's changed. I know it's not enough, but I just want you to know that I'm trying. I've realized a lot in the past few months, and I hope you can see that." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it didn't erase the years of neglect, of her turning a blind eye to everything I had been carrying for so long. Still, there was something different in her tone, a realization, a shift in her understanding of what had happened between us. "I hear you, Michelle," I finally said, my voice steady but calm. "I appreciate you saying that, but I've had to learn to stop waiting for things to be fixed. I'm not the same person I was when I left. I'm not waiting for apologies, and I'm not looking for answers anymore." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mom, are you saying you don't want to come back?" I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know what the future holds, but right now, I need to be here. I need to keep living for myself. I've done everything I could for you and Kayla, but now I'm doing this for me." "I understand," she said, her voice small but full of emotion. "I really do." I could feel the distance between us closing, but in a different way than I had ever anticipated. It wasn't about me being the fixer anymore. It was about her understanding that I had my own life now, that I wasn't just a resource to be drawn from. "I want you to keep going, Michelle," I said. "Keep working on yourself and keep supporting Kayla. But remember, your happiness doesn't have to come at the expense of someone else's." "I'll try." "Mom," she said quietly. "I know you will," I replied, the weight of the conversation settling in my chest. "But don't do it for me. Do it for you." I ended the call feeling something I hadn't expected: hope. Not just for Michelle or Kayla, but for myself. I had finally let go of the guilt, the need to be everything for everyone. I wasn't going back to fix things. I wasn't going back to be the caretaker, the one who kept everything in place. I was going forward, and that was enough. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the hum of the city below, I felt at peace for the first time in a long time. It wasn't that I didn't still love them. It wasn't that I didn't care, but I had learned that I couldn't carry their burdens anymore. They had to carry their own, and I was finally free. The next morning, I woke up early, ready to explore Milan once more. But this time, I wasn't rushing. I wasn't trying to do everything in a hurry. I was savoring the moment, taking each step slowly and deliberately. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I wasn't waiting for anything or anyone to change. I was living for myself, and that was the greatest gift I could give myself. As I walked through the streets of Milan, feeling the sun warm my face, I realized something I had never truly understood before. The only person who could define my happiness was me, and I was finally choosing to be happy. The train ride from Milan to the coast was peaceful, a quiet journey that I took alone, as I had grown accustomed to over the past months. The landscape blurred past me, the patchwork of fields and small towns offering no real destination. And yet, for the first time, I felt like I was headed exactly where I needed to go. This chapter of my life was closing, but I was no longer searching for answers. I had found them. I had learned to be at peace with the choices I made, the mistakes I had endured, and the journey I had taken to get here. I had spent so many years trying to fix everyone else, fix my family, fix my relationships, and it had drained me. But now, standing on the precipice of a new life, I understood something crucial. Fixing someone else, especially at the cost of your own happiness, was never going to heal what was broken inside of you. And that was what had finally clicked for me. I had been carrying the weight of my family's needs for too long. It wasn't just about the financial sacrifices. It wasn't just about taking care of them emotionally or physically. It was about giving so much of myself, so much of my energy, to the point that I had nothing left for me. I had lost who I was in the process. And when I realized that, when I finally saw that, it was like a burden had been lifted. I wasn't their savior. I wasn't meant to bear the weight of their mistakes, their problems, their ungratefulness. I was meant to live my life. The seaside town I arrived in was small, quaint, and perfect. I hadn't planned on staying, but something about the gentle breeze, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks, and the peaceful atmosphere called to me. The air was salty and fresh, carrying the promise of change. It was as if the ocean itself had welcomed me, finally free, finally at peace. I checked into a small inn by the sea. The owner, a kind woman with weathered hands and a warm smile, showed me to a room overlooking the water. The room was simple, yet perfect. A small bed, a desk, a chair by the window. It was all I needed. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I didn't feel the need to keep running. I could just be. As I sat on the edge of the bed, looking out at the vast expanse of the ocean, I thought about everything that had led me here, about Michelle and Kayla, and how I had spent so many years waiting for them to change, to come to terms with their mistakes, to understand the depth of my sacrifices. I realized that I had been waiting for something outside of myself to fix me, when the only person who could do that was me. I had let go of the past, the hurt, the betrayal, the guilt. I had forgiven them, not because they had asked for it, but because I needed to. I needed to release myself from the weight of carrying it all. I had learned to stop waiting for someone else to fix what was broken inside me. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, but it was necessary. That evening, I walked along the beach, the cool sand beneath my feet, the sky streaked with the colors of the setting sun. There was something about this place, something that made me feel like I was finally, truly home. Not just physically, but in my soul. I could hear the soft murmur of the waves, the distant call of seagulls, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I wasn't running from the past. I wasn't running from my mistakes, my family's mistakes, or my guilt. I was walking forward, calmly, into a future that was mine to shape. The next morning, I received a call from Michelle. I almost didn't answer at first, but I knew this moment would come, just like everything else that had unfolded. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative but warm, "I just wanted to check in. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about everything. I know I haven't been the daughter you needed, and I'm sorry. I want to do better, and I'm working on it. I don't expect you to come back, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I missed, and I want to make it right." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't begging for me to return. She was simply acknowledging the truth, and that was enough. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. "I don't need you to fix everything. I just need you to take care of yourself. And Kayla, you can't keep trying to fix me. You have to start living for you." "I know," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll make things right, Mom. I promise." I felt a wave of peace wash over me. I wasn't waiting for her to fix everything, and I wasn't waiting for her to heal. She had to do that on her own, but I knew that she was beginning to understand. When I ended the call, I sat on the beach for a while, watching the waves roll in and out, thinking about how far I had come, how far they had come. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to be the person I was before, always fixing, always giving, always sacrificing. I had learned that I was enough as I was, and I didn't need anyone else's validation to prove that. It wasn't about revenge or anger or even forgiveness anymore. It was about acceptance. Acceptance of the choices I had made, the paths I had walked, and the future that was mine to shape. I wasn't defined by what had happened. I was defined by who I had become, and in that moment, I knew I had finally found my peace. The future was mine now, and I was no longer waiting for it to unfold. I was walking into it, one step at a time, and that was enough. As I walked along the shoreline, the wind in my hair and the sea at my feet, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. This was my life now, and I was living it on my own terms. It was enough, and it always had been. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.